On Saturday, July 26, 2014, inside room 7AB of Comic-Con, a panel was held that was supposed to define the future of the YA genre for years to come. On stage that day, renowned YA author James Frey was launching his latest project, Endgame, a book trilogy set to fill the massive hole the Hunger Games was about to leave behind. Without selling a single copy, Frey already had a movie deal with 20th Century Fox and a partnership with Google's Niantic Lab, the same studio that would later make Pokemon Go, for an ambitious augmented reality game. However, the real headline was that hidden in its pages, in the margins and illustrations, was a real-life puzzle.
Written into the text of each book is a puzzle, will allow you to find a real key. If you find the real key we've hidden somewhere on Earth, it opens a case filled with for the first book, $500,000 of gold.
In the end, the book faded, the movie never happened, the game got cancelled, but the puzzle remained. So, today we're gonna revisit the story of the greatest YA novel that never was and its $500,000 golden puzzle. So, what was Endgame even about? Well, 12,000 years ago, an advanced civilization descended from the sky and genetically engineered humans to mine gold for them, creating the 12 original bloodlines that would populate the planet. Once they had enough gold, they left, but not before making a promise. One day, they'll return. And when they did, humanity would have to play a game to find 3 keys, deciding which bloodline would survive an apocalyptic event. To prepare, each of the 12 bloodlines had to always have a player ready, aged 13 to 20, trained in the arts of combat, disguise, history, and of course, assassination. Generation after generation, these players prepared for the day the game would begin, hoping they could win and save everything and everyone they loved. Was it any good though? Well, it's been a while since I read the book, but as far as I can remember, I enjoyed it enough to finish the book, but not to keep up with the trilogy. However, something that was really obvious, especially for a 14-year-old that had read every single YA novel under the sun at that point, was how hard this book was trying to be the next big thing. Like, you can almost hear the conversation where Niels Johnson Shelton asked James Frey how many plot points he wanted. Let's be honest, I don't think James Frey did much writing. And Frey was like, yes. This movie has aliens, ancient aliens to be more precise, a battle royale on top of an apocalypse, 12 different protagonists from all walks of life, even though we all know the US girl is the main character, a treasure hunt, and a pointless love triangle. The whole thing just feels like a swan song for the YA genre, desperate to appeal to every single fanbase at the time. Either way, the truth is that a lot of money, time, and effort went into trying to make this franchise take off. For example, the person that Fox put in charge of the project was Wick Godfrey, that during the 2010s produced a few films that you might have heard of, such as The Twilight Saga, Eragon, The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, the TV adaptation of Looking for Alaska, the Maze Runner saga, The Longest Ride, and the 2017 Power Rangers movie. So if this man wasn't able to turn your YA book into a successful movie franchise, well, maybe it was never meant to be. Also, let's not forget the whole cross-platform campaign. Each of the 12 characters had their own social media accounts, posting as if they were real teens you could get to know. The Niantic Lab ARG was also huge. Not only would you be able to join clans from all 12 of the bloodlines, but you could also get loot from going to certain IRL places such as museums or archaeological sites.
You can turn on your phone and everywhere you go you can play it. You'll walk around and you'll see other players on a map, and if you're close enough to them, just like in Endgame, when the players are close enough to each other, they fight each other, you can fight other people. At the same time, you'll be able to go on some of these trips. So if you go to the Met and you stand in front of those Sumerian weapons, they become part of your arsenal.
And of course, there was the puzzle that made all the headlines. According to Frey, the idea came from his childhood experience with the famous Masquerade puzzle. Even with all this effort, the studio knew they'd only turn in a profit if teens got invested enough in the story, so they would drag their friends and family to see a film they'd never heard of. So they tried to make it seem like the story and the puzzle were connected, which wasn't entirely true. Matt Leibowitz, the creator of the puzzle, did try to integrate the lore behind the clues to the main storyline. We can actually still find some of this lore by accessing the endgamepuzzle.com website through the Wayback Machine, though only snapshots for the 3 first puzzles survive. However, all of these events canonically take place before the events of Endgame the Calling, which is why, as you'll see in a moment, reading the entire book was of little to no help when it came to solving the actual puzzle. You see, back in the day when I tried to solve this thing, the issue wasn't just that the puzzle was hard, which it definitely was, it's that there was no clear starting point. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, I wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed back then, but if you look at the old Endgame forums, you'll see that it wasn't just me. A lot of players really struggled to figure out where to even begin. The book is constantly throwing at you links, ciphers, random numbers, strange symbols, and pictures, making it really hard to know where to start. And even when you did stumble upon clues that were clearly part of the real puzzle, it was often unclear what you were supposed to do with them. On top of all this, players faced several other hurdles, such as the puzzle website not properly running on every computer or navigator, a parallel running ARG that some players spent a lot of time solving even though it clearly stated it had nothing to do with the main puzzle, and the existence of red herring sites, such as the infamous EL121212 site, just one of the many misleading links that had nothing to do with the real puzzle except for the first one. So, how did you actually solve the puzzle? Allow me to introduce you to the protagonist of this section of the video, Lancelot, the only player I could find who documented their entire journey in real time through a series of blog posts. There's just one problem. Lancelot never actually published the puzzle solutions themselves. For those, all credit goes to Leah from the channel Puzzles and Challenges, who kindly let me use her video as a guide to walk you through the answers. To keep things moving, I won't be breaking down every clue in full detail, so if you want a deeper dive or just love obscure ARGs, please check out Leah's channel. The Endgame puzzle went live with the book's release on October 7, 2014 and was set to run for 2 years. According to Frey, if no one solved it within that time, the prize money would go back to him. To keep track of your progress, you had to log in with a Google account to the Kepler Futuristics website. Once inside, you'd see this artifact with 3 openings, each one representing a stage of this first phase of the puzzle. These stages were stone, glass, and metal. Finding the URL for the stone stage was actually pretty clever. You see, one of the book's main characters is this Chinese kid named An Liu, who keeps getting these random blinks and shivers throughout the story. Some absolute genius had the brilliant idea to translate these movements into Morse code. If you painstakingly transcribe every single blink and shiver combination An Liu has throughout the book, you'll eventually find the following text that could be turned into a URL. Once you typed in the URL, you'll land in this page that had 2 buttons, one for blinking and one for shivering. In order to prove that you didn't found this page by accident, a random word would appear that you have to translate into Morse code using the buttons. Next up, you faced an old school punch card computer with 2 cards, one for numbers and one for letters. The key was to find a specific 13-digit number with the following format. The solution wasn't hidden inside the book, but right on the cover above the barcode. The English edition's ISBN. Here is the part where I would have lost since I have the Spanish version of the book. Yet again, if you were smart enough to figure out that this was supposed to be the ISBN number, you were probably smart enough to search for the English one. Once you enter the correct ISBN, the computer spat out a list of numbers related to letters, each matching a page in the book. By putting them in order, you spelled the following Latin phrase. After entering the punch card answer, you'd face a disc with 8 rings and needed to find an 8-letter word. The clue was this photo of a Roman column with several phrases on it. By picking out the letters that could double as Roman numerals and then treating each numeral as a clock hand direction, so 11 points here, 1 there, and so on, you'd end up drawing shapes that look like letters. Reading these shapes in reverse spelled out the word "insculpo." On November 14, 2014, about a month after the puzzle had officially begun, our protagonist made a post where he showed that he had already completed the stone part and was struggling with finding the solution to the first glass puzzle, which was this passenger list. Now, the reason why Lancelot was having trouble with this section is because he was focusing on the names instead of taking a look at these numbers right here. The numbers represent different nucleotides from human DNA. Each row named a DNA sequence, and these numbers gave you a range. From here, you just had to look up the sequence online, extract the nucleotides between those indexes, and then view them in the FASTA format. Now, in case you fell asleep during your biology class, every 3 nucleotides form a codon, and each codon translates to a specific amino acid using the standard codon table. By decoding each set, you'd get a string of amino acids that spelled out the next URL. Next, you had to identify the chemical reaction shown across these 4 pages, which was the iodine clock reaction. To solve this section, you had to simulate the reaction by turning on your webcam, pointing it at something white, and then quickly switching it to something dark blue, replicating the color change of the reaction. After this, you'd be met with yet another disk with 8 rings. This time, to find the 8-word password, you have to find the following coordinates inside the book that point to Quiling, China and Stonehenge. The answer to this puzzle comes from the point where these 2 coordinates intersect, which is Mount Terror in Antarctica. On the 2nd of December 2014, Lancelot made another post showing that he had successfully opened the glass iris, meaning that he only had one more to go. The metal face was more of the same, except that now you had to show your artistic side, by making a cube using these images, playing an instrument, and then making a shuriken using the following pages. How were you supposed to know you had to make a shuriken? I have no idea. And even if I knew that's what you were supposed to do, I don't think I could have pulled it off. On January 28, 2015, Lancelot posted two images. One displayed the three irises from the Kepler Futuristics website, indicating that he had completed Phase 1. The second image was of a countdown for the release of Phase 2. You see, from the start, the rules stated that the puzzle would be divided into 3 phases. The date when each puzzle became available was determined solely by the sponsor, which I believe was 20th Century Fox. I assume the idea here was to monitor how quickly players were solving the puzzle so they could time the final phase to coincide with the release of the next book, which was set to launch on October 8, 2015. During this time, Lancelot decided to run a poll asking players how far they had made it, publishing the results on Christmas Day 2014. According to the poll, out of 42 players, 17 hadn't completed a single puzzle, 6 had been able to solve one and answer parts of others, 15 had completed the stone puzzles, 0 had completed the stone and glass puzzles, and only 4 had been able to complete all 3, joining Lancelot in the waiting room for Phase 2 to begin. On Thursday, March 12, 2015, Phase 2.1 dropped as a comic, which probably had some killer lore that we'll never get to see since it was an archive by the Wayback Machine. To solve it, you had to spot Proxima Centauri among some star charts, then enter its coordinates relative to Mount Terror into this machine. On the back of the machine there was a section with 3 knobs and a small clock displaying GMT time. One specific knob had the letters ABCMX, while the other 2 showed numbers from 0 to 9. ABCMX is the classification system scientists use for solar flare intensity, so all you had to do here was to enter the current solar flare value. Now the last part involved matching colors in some convoluted ways, but I honestly don't know how this works, and nor does Leah. On Sunday, March 15, 2015, just 3 days after Phase 2 was launched, Lancelot made a post with a photo of the waiting room for Phase 2.2. In the picture we can see the countdown for the next round that would release on May 16, 2015. When the day finally arrived, the players were met with a table of airport codes with missing entries. To solve it, you had to spot the patterns within the letters. For the second part, you'd be met with this image featuring a bear and a tunnel, which was a hint for the TunnelBear VPN service. All you had to do here was to install the TunnelBear extension and change your virtual location to match the locations referenced by the images. So, the Netherlands, UK, France, Spain, Italy, Japan, Sweden, the US, and Albania. Now, if you get the feeling that this section of the puzzle wasn't as hard compared to some of the previous ones, you'd be correct, since Lancelot managed to solve it in just 1 day, posting this image of the waiting room for the last challenge on Sunday, May 17, 2015. On August 1, 2015, Lancelot made a post sharing some GIFs and photos for those curious about how the final puzzle looked like. Apart from a couple of bugs, he was ready to begin. One less puzzle standing between him and $500,000 in solid gold. The final stage was a vault, towering over 6 floors consisting of 36 rooms that form a 6x6 grid. At the center of each floor was a hatch that would only open if the player walked through the grid in the correct path. On the first floor, the answer was a single elusive word, ambages, Latin for riddles or obscurities. The second floor demanded an ancient Latin phrase that I'm not even gonna try to pronounce, a riddle in itself, promising that wherever you turn, you will find the end of the age. For the third floor, you had to strip every Latin word from a massive grid, leaving behind only 4 letters. Morse, the Latin word for dead. The fourth and fifth floors were even more unforgiving. You had to chart a precise path, one misstep away from failure. How do you know where to walk? Those answers have been lost to time. The sixth and final floor had no letters, only symbols that you had to assign a color to. From here you'd notice that some colors only appear in specific rows or columns, like yellow that only appears in the first column or white that only appears in the last row. If you stack the layers one on top of the other, you'd get the numbers 1 through 8. From here, all you had to do was to walk in that order to open the hatch. After this, you'd be met with one final puzzle. Only by locating the pins related to the puzzles in this wall and remembering the exact order in which they were solved, could you place the pins correctly. When the final pin clicked into place, the vault's door slowly cracked open, revealing the ultimate prize, a golden coin, and the solution to Endgame's legendary $500,000 puzzle. On Tuesday, August 25, 2015, Lancelot made his last post related to the Endgame puzzle with the following message: "End of the game for me. Far too late, of course." So, who was the absolute madman that was able to solve all of this? The winner was Mexican astrophysics student Froilán Moreno del Rio, who on August 11, 2015 made a Facebook post revealing to the world that he was the first player to solve the puzzle. The gold ceremony took place on October 8, 2015 at Caesar's Palace, where Froilán casually strolled into the casino and tossed all the gold from the display into his backpack. Now, I did try to contact Froilán through the profile he used for those posts, but it appears he abandoned it long time ago. Which is understandable. I'd probably disappear too if I won $500,000 in gold, especially from Facebook. So now there is only one question left to answer, which is what happened to the Endgame series. The second book, Endgame Sky Key, was released to the public on October 6, 2015. At the 2014 Comic-Con panel, Frey mentioned that the price for solving the second book's puzzle would be of $1 million, with $1.5 million promised for the final book. During the gold ceremony on October 8, he was asked once again about the prize money for Sky Key and claimed it would be divided into 25 cash prizes ranging from $5,000 to $100,000. Despite these claims, the book itself never mentions any kind of prize for solving the puzzle. The remaining two puzzles were eventually released, however, to this day it's unclear if anyone ever solved them. All the projects surrounding the book, such as the Niantic Labs ARG and the movie, were cancelled after somewhat disappointing book sales. While it's hard to pin down the exact number of copies Endgame sold, we do know enough about its sales performance to ballpark a number. For starters, the book never made it to the top 10 New York Times bestseller list in 2014, though it did reach the extended also selling list. Now, the number of books required to crack the top 10 varies depending on the season and the competition, but for fiction titles, it's usually between 4,000 and 8,000 copies sold in a single week. Even with a sales boost during the 2014 holiday season, which is when I got the book, Endgame still never appeared in the industry's Nielsen Bookscan top 10,000 for either 2014 or 2015. This means its total US print sales probably never exceeded 20,000 to 25,000 copies. Figuring out how many people actually tried to solve the puzzle is where things get interesting. In the gold ceremony interview, James Frey claimed that around 1 million people interacted with the puzzle, though most found it quite challenging and quit, leaving around 130 to 140,000 players that actually took the puzzle seriously. On October 22, 2014, just 2 weeks after the book's release, he told the bookseller that 20,000 people had finished the first Endgame puzzle, which I assume was the Blink Shiver one. In another interview on November 18, he said that number had jumped to 85,000 players. However, in a post made on November 20th, our good friend Lancelot mentioned that he was a bit skeptical about these figures. After doing some digging, he found a way to check how many people had clicked a particular element, presumably one of the 3 logins for the puzzles. According to Lancelot, the element had only been clicked 634 times since October 2014, with only half of those clicks coming from unique visitors. With the best estimates putting total book sales well below 100,000, it's clear that Frey might have had taken some creative license with the number of real active players. Despite a general lack of interest in the series, James Frey actually continued expanding the universe of Endgame with several companion works. This included Endgame: The Training Diaries, a collection of novellas offering backstory for key players, as well as Endgame: The Zero Line Chronicles and the complete Fugitive Archives, which bundles 3 novellas. So why did this whole Endgame thing never work out? Well, the obvious answer is that by 2014, audiences were starting to show signs of fatigue with the YA genre, especially when it came to dystopian trilogies and stories about teens saving the world. When it comes to the book itself, I think it's a great example of how trying to appeal to everyone often means you end up appealing to no one. A lesson that I feel applies to both art and life in general. Do I personally think Endgame is worse than something like Divergent or City of Bones? Not really. Endgame the Colony is currently sitting at a very respectable 3.72 rating on Goodreads based on 21,000 ratings and 2,000 reviews, compared to Divergent's 4.14 rating or City of Bones' 4.07 rating. The difference is that those books knew exactly what kind of story they wanted to tell and played to their strengths. In the case of Divergent, it had a cool protagonist, or at least it made you feel special, while Shadowhunters was all about the appeal of having a hot, emo tattooed boyfriend. As I said before, Endgame threw every single concept and trope at you, hoping at least one would stick. On paper, having 12 protagonists from all walks of life sound really interesting, but in reality it made it really hard to connect with any of the players. Just as you started to get invested in one storyline, you'd suddenly be thrown to the other side of the world to follow someone else. This also meant that you had to slog through the less interesting plots just to get to the ones you actually cared about. This was especially true with Sarah Alopai, who was arguably the main character. If you were invested in her storyline or her dumb love triangle, you were probably ready to put the book down. It also didn't help that James Frey was beefing with Oprah at the time for taking some creative licenses in his memoir A Million Little Pieces. Then there was the Full Fathom 5 scandal. Back in 2009, Frey founded his own young adult publishing company where he hired young, aspiring, and often broke writers straight out of college, paid them pennies on the dollar, and then profited from their work. That was the case of Joby Hughes, who co-wrote the highly successful Lorien Legacy series with Frey until Frey removed him from the project after an argument. And as you can imagine, all this did serious damage to Frey's reputation within the YA community, to the point that some particularly frustrated players questioned whether there was even a prize, arguing that if anyone would create an unsolvable puzzle with a non-existent prize just to boost book sales, well, that would be James Frey. Finally, I feel that in some ways the book would have been better off without the $500,000 prize hanging over its head. Because of the large prize money, the puzzle had to be quite challenging, which ended up alienating more casual fans who just wanted to be part of the hunt, ultimately limiting the viral potential of both the book and the puzzle. In the case of those hardcore puzzle solvers, they were discouraged by the community to share their findings and overall journey, which is why it was extremely hard for me to find any sort of community about the topic. As I mentioned before, there is little to nothing inside the actual story of the book that could help you solve the puzzle, which widened even more the distance between the book readers and the puzzle solvers, which was a problem because you needed both sides to create a solid fandom. And last but not least, it felt very obvious that this was just part of a bigger gimmick to make the series the next big YA thing. Compare that to something like Gravity Falls Cypher Hunt. That felt like a genuine attempt at bringing together the community one last time, with fans from all over the world joining in. Hell, even the Forest fan treasure hunters managed to build a small but active community, sharing theories and stories despite having way more money on the line. I would even argue that once the treasure was found, some inside the community could at least go with the good old, maybe the real treasure was the friends we made along the way, or just the fact that they actually got to touch some grass as Forrest himself intended. So, there you have it, dear viewer, the story of Endgame, the biggest YA novel that never was, and its $500,000 prize. So, what do you think? Were you familiar with the story? Did you read the book? Did you actually try to solve the puzzle? Or even better, manage to solve one of the many puzzles? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.